nurse coming to the mall. Living life for the next drop. keyboard nerds, time to get them on. Living life for the next drop.
Well, happy Sunday, Smite fans. You are watching the SCC. We are in North America. It is Dulcin and Goremizer bringing you into it, and it is Hugs and Kisses, Gore, versus Gone to Tahiti, a matchup of two teams looking to build some momentum here in this phase of the SCC.
Yeah, I will admit, I'm kind of surprised with what we've seen out of Gone to Tahiti this year, that they are sitting, where they are in the standings as of right now. But both of these teams have a lot coming up for them specifically today. I mean, both of them, I believe, are 0-2 coming into this and are going to be fighting for their rights to, like you said, climb up forward just because of the fact that they are going to be going forward. And I misspoke. Hugs and Kisses is only 0-1 as of right now. And so I was miscounting the entire sets that they've played. The same thing up there with Get a Grip doing 1-0. The last two teams to try and get it. And I believe they have double headers today, so that'll probably make up for where some of those games are.
Yeah, and you know, it's kind of everyone chasing winner dogs, and depending on how Get a Grip does, them as well. So when you get a chance against one of the lower teams, I think here in the SEC, it's ever so important to put your best foot forward, potentially grab yourself a win here in a matchup like this. You look at the Hugs and Kisses roster, definitely some names you'd recognize: Chronic, Kirmi, Privative, Renjaru, and Oceans. And Gore, Gone to Tahiti, I mean, that's a somewhat new roster, not Gone to Tahiti, Hugs and Kisses. Gone to Tahiti, though, definitely some names you'll recognize if you've been watching the SEC for a little while: Mando, Cope, Sops, Diesel, and Sybil. So you throw your hat in one of the two rings, Gore? I mean, two teams that haven't found a win yet. Does one have a slight edge in your mind?
I want to lean towards Gone to Tahiti just because, like you said, a bunch of names that you should recognize. If you've been watching this level, like Challenger Circuit, Minor League, whatever it's been called throughout all of the years, I cast some of these people before I was hired at Hi-Rez, right? So, like, I know these guys have been playing for a long time. And so I'm going to favor them, but I will say we've seen Kiermi, we've seen Rinjaru and Oceans a lot in the past as well, who have been able to show up. I mean, Kiermi even more so, who's been able to jump onto some of these teams to help them do qualifications or help them in playoffs and things like that. So I think there's a lot to be said about the Hugs and Kisses roster. I think that Gone to Tahiti, though, have that slight edge just because of precedent. Granted, we've seen how often that truly ends up mattering in a matchup.
Right. Well, that's what's good about the SEC, I think. You can put your best foot forward any given week, and name recognition or not, you have a chance at upsetting a team that, maybe has been in the limelight, as it were, a little bit more. Picks and bans for game number 1. Aphrodite, that'll be the first ban here for GTT. An interesting ban there, Gore. We see that some at the SPL level, but very player-specific, I think, in that pick. Is Aphrodite now at a point where we might need to expect to see her in the pick ban phase a little bit more often, regardless of who's playing?
Yeah, I think this is something that is just going to hold true more often than not when people recognize how strong a healer can be, and more so when a person on the other team can play them at their highest potential, because there's a reason, like, you don't see Aphrodite every single SPL game, but if you let her through on, say, like an SSG game, then, well, it's GG, right? So you have to be able to balance that, I think, properly. You know, gods like Emoja maybe balance it out a little bit easier. Persephone's just good at this level. Same thing there for Cthulhu and Kuzenbo. But the Hell Aphrodite feel like a specific target at this point, and it has to be something Hugs and Kisses have made work in the past and look good with, because otherwise you can control them for the most part. It just depends on the player.
Now, Gore, this is a pick. I'm not even going to have to ask. We are expecting to see a lot more in the pick ban phase here at every level of play, I think. Set has skyrocketed in the play count here recently. I believe it was 5 picks over in the North American SEC this phase. He has won all of them. So worthwhile maybe locking in first. The burst potential. And Gore, there's actually some flexibility, I think, in some of the build paths we've seen players go with this set. Full-on burst, a little bit more bruisery, some sustain if you want to throw a Soul Eater or something in there. Set is kind of the ultimate flex pick. I think you could see him in solo, you could see him in jungle, mid, apparently ADC now. I think support Set is maybe the only thing we haven't seen yet.
And you know what? We're just a hop, skip, and a jump away from someone trying it, right? Like, it's going to happen eventually. It's just whether or not that's this year is maybe the biggest question. We'll have to see, though, as they come through. I mean, I like Set. I like On Her. I like this matchup just because, as you had said, Set here is very flexible. On Her, I think, equally as flexible. Maybe not to 4 different roles that we've seen him played across the map, but he can definitely fit into 2 there, going over either into mid or over there for that carry position. Still keeping Set as someone who pairs well with Sobek, same thing alongside this On Her. So either one, I like it because Gone to Tahiti keep this ambiguous. Hugs and Kisses, though, Erlong, Shin, Cupid. Enough said. Like, I mean, if I'm watching, depending on the team I'm watching, that's a win. I mean, you have to look at it. Again, I'm going to compare somebody to Space Station Gaming here, and since they had Aphrodite banned against them, then this is maybe
SSG
even
draft.
more appropriate. And it feels so solid for him. The only thing out there is the Merlin. Get him out of there, replace it with something like a Hera, and you're solid. You're set for where you need to be going. I do still like Merlin, though. It's been a hot minute since we really gotten to see him. I don't think it's because he's bad. I just think it's that there's way more mages available, and people have realized that they can pick their flavor. And I actually think that's what I like about Hugs and Kisses here, is that you aren't just going for, a Hera because it is the best thing that maybe is available for it, or what we've seen work in compositions like this in the Pro League. You're going for Merlin because you know his flavor fits your style.
Gore, I love Merlin, man. I love mid as my main role in Smite. I love kind of the sit-back, pour-out damage style of the mages. Merlin fits that bill so well. He's so much fun to play, and I think a lot of fun to watch. Unfortunate he's not kind of at his peak, but we saw him a lot in Phase 1. Obviously, some numbers there tweaked. So not necessarily at the forefront in that mage pool, but definitely one I'm not discounting here. I think he, in the right scenarios, can have an impact. You need some peel on the front line. He has to have that ability to sit back, hit those rotations, pull in some enemies, deal some good damage there. So depends what you build around him. And Gore, you look at what Hugs and Kisses are putting around this Merlin. They've got great lockdown already in the Erlong Shen, the Cerberus there to set up some team fights as well. Seems like a decent composition building around this mid lane mage already.
Yeah, he's going to be able to, like you said, just let him sit in the back line and do whatever he needs to, right? And it is that fun of trying to balance which elements you're throwing out, all the damage that comes through. With something like Cerberus Erlang Shin, the pin specifically comes into my mind just because ideally this Erlang is going into the jungle, and so you'll see him with Merlin a lot in this early game. It should be easy setup, very easy damage application, as well as Divine Ruin application once that comes online, which you maybe don't need it as much. You're going up against Scylla, so there's maybe going to be some lifesteal, but there's not a lot of healing on Ganta Tahiti, so we might be able to focus on some other sort of penetration that comes through as well. Either way, he's still great at getting that damage out there, even though it's more burn damage, it's sustained damage, as opposed to something like what Scylla's going to bring, which is burst damage. It's kill you dead fast damage, as opposed to hugs and kisses. Well, it feels like just kind of overall burn. Like, they don't necessarily have a huge amount of burst that I see. Some big bursty abilities, but for the most part, it is something that will just keep a team fight in their favor, because they're slowly going to take you down from 100 to 0 consistently versus having to hit those big burst abilities.
Well, Set was locked in so early, and the picture has now maybe become a little bit clearer after the other 4 picks for GTT have been locked in. Gore, it's looking like a solo lane set here, with Thor, of course, in the jungle, Sobek then with on her for Diesel in that duo lane. Solo lane Set, it's something we've seen. Do you think it has that same oomph that maybe the mid lane and Hunter Set does?
But what if it ended up being Thor solo and Set jungle? Because
You're
that
right,
is
Thor.
also something that we've seen. I actually really like this because I think it's so ridiculously ambiguous. But I do think Set, as from what we've seen, I've liked his performance in solo lane more than I've liked Thor's performance in solo lane. Plus Thor, let's face it, from top to bottom, if you get an ultimate that lets you traverse almost half of the map, you really want to use that in the jungle, because it can set up the duo lane, the mid lane, and the solo lane, right? It helps everybody out a little bit. So I like that transition, but it'll be up to Ganta Tahiti as to where those go. Either way, what I'm looking at is Thor stun, Sobek pluck on her, pillar stun, or just against a wall. There's a lot of setup for one name, I'm a monster, that is going to come through from Scylla. If I'm looking at, man, I have this, granted, it's a pretty big circle, but also easily missed ability in her ultimate there for Scylla. That's a lot of setup. That is a lot of burst. And when I look at the other side, Merlin, Cupid, Erlang, I see at least 3 targets that you could potentially one-shot if you get the right Crush, I'm a Monster combo. Cerberus, Cucullin will probably live through it, but not for long, with an on-her Set and Thor on the team. I like what Ganta Tahiti have in terms of some of their team fight, but they are squishy. It is a very squishy lineup. They don't necessarily get the same bruiser nature, even though you can build Thor a little tanky, Set a little tanky, that Cucullin and Cerberus are going to be bringing.
A lot of individual lockdown on one side, potential AoE lockdown maybe on the other. Game number 1, Ganta Tahiti versus Hugs and Kisses. Reminder, both of these teams not a win yet here in this phase of the North American SCC, so ever important, especially this early on. You're 0-1, you're 0-2, every other team is, the highest team is 2-0, the next highest team, 1-0 or 1-1, so these are the types of games you can absolutely catch back up in. It is indeed Sops on Thor out of the jungle, Mando Warrior on Set, Dulcet and Gore on the cast, Doug on the camera. It's going to be Chronic going up against this Set in the solo lane. Gore, Cucullin against Set, 2 gods that really want to bully out their opponents, so maybe see some fireworks there in the solo lane.
Early on, Cucullin should be able to take advantage of that. Like, Set does a lot of damage, but you're really looking as he progresses. I think Mifflin put it perfectly the other day. That level 6 mark is where things just change, right? It's like you don't win that anymore, and maybe the damage comes through. It might be different for the Warrior than what we've gotten to see, because there's been a lot of Set ADC up in the Pro League as he's been over there for the carry role. But I think here, for the most part, he's just going to be focused on farming a little bit early on, and there is a lot of question marks. I mean, how close to fine okay are you, right? Like, if you're able to pull out what Ghost Gaming have pulled out, then I don't doubt this Set in the least. There's a little bit of pressure on Mando to make this work, just because, we've typically seen him on a lot of Guardians. This will be a little bit of a flex overall for them.
We have seen a rise of Cucullin as well, even outside of this specific matchup. The ability to lane bully so important here. Definitely want to keep our eyes on the mid lane here in this matchup as well. Flicker is great for Merlin. I mean, we've talked a little bit about how if he is able to sit back, I mean, he has the potential for massive damage as the game goes on. Flicker, I mean, it moves you a little bit, right? I mean, it shifts you from one spot to another, but it's not a huge distance. And so, Gore, admittedly, as much as I love Merlin, might be my favorite god, I am worried about Sops' ability to just ult there kind of freely in the mid lane once those beads are down, especially, you know, Sybil, you hit a Sikkim very, well, I'm not going to say easy, but able to do so on that Merlin out of the mid lane. Privitiv's going to have to choose his positioning carefully, not only in team fights, but in this laning phase, because the moment Thor takes over to level 5, it's kind of easy ganks there on the mid.
And this is interesting all around because it feels like Ganta Tahiti have been able to make a couple of swaps, specifically Sops not being in the mid lane, which is something I have gotten used to seeing. Cope is over there as the support. Sybil is over there as the mid. They've definitely done a little bit of shuffling.
Yeah,
Diesel and Mando are in the right spots, but they're 3v3 core, which is weird because it's still the same 3v3 core. They're just playing different roles now. Swapped it up a little bit. So this could be interesting for Ganta Tahiti. It's also an interesting swap to come through. But again, I think I said this earlier. A lot of them have been playing a long time. And now I can add the caveat, a lot of them have played multiple roles over that time, so it's not too surprising to maybe see them be flexible enough to make it work here. There's some question marks. I mean, I've seen a lot of Sops like Kronos lately in mid and things like that, so I'm wondering what we'll get to see out of this Thor. So far, neither of these teams, almost uncharacteristic of North American Challenger Circuit, they haven't been fighting as of yet. I mean, there's been a little bit of poke here and there, but there haven't been many big kills.
There is a block onto Oceans, but Diesel on this on her, at least initially into this laning phase, not going to be able to return around all that much damage. And Gore, with all the role swaps and some of the interesting picks we don't often see, haven't gotten a moment to talk about the on her either. Ocean's realizing maybe there's some early damage potential for him and not so much for Ganta Tahiti. He's going to look over towards this purple buff. Diesel beadsing out what would have potentially been a stun. Now purple buff sacrificed over to the red side.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Diesel, you can't really fight this anymore. I mean, they've showcased twice now, I would argue, that if you stay around even slightly too long, they'll kill you. And now it's a little dangerous for Sops. I mean, a good stun from Oceans, as well as the damage that Cerberus is putting out right now, locked up with Kirmi, as well as Privitive coming over. That's a dangerous buff to try and contest. This is good steals from Hugs and Kisses. And all this pressure, I mean, normally the kind of pressure you get only from getting something like First Blood, and they're picking it up just off of the damage they're doing.
And, you know, I think that kind of leans in a bit to where I was going before Hugs and Kisses kind of walked their way in. And that's this on her, and how we haven't seen really all that much, Gore. I mean, it's what? It's Cupid, it's Rom, Jingwei, you know, Hachiman, kind of that next tier down that we see the SPL players go towards. On her has not really been in that conversation. Obviously has the ability to stun, lock down, big ult damage seemingly all at once. Why maybe now? Why do you think Ganta Tahiti is going towards this unconventional pick?
I think at the end of the day, Onher's still just good, right? I don't know if there's a lot necessarily against him as much as it is that other hunters play the current builds a little better than what Onher brings. And that actually is a little interesting to me because you would think, you know, you roll it back, you see Executioner getting nerfed for this year.
Yep.
And honestly makes me think that Onher would then maybe rise in status because that's what his passive does. It's essentially what old Executioner used to do. It's really great for some of that protection trap.
Whoa, look at the collapse here from Ganta Tahiti. Sops ults down, but Privitive has the turnaround damage. Merlin 1, Sops 0, 5 minutes into the game. That's one that Ganta Tahiti were looking for. Cope went in against 3, but it's Hugs and Kisses that pick up first blood.
It seemed like there was a little bit of a disconnect. I'd have to go back and watch where the damage from I'm a Monster landed, but it seemed like it was just a little wider if it connected. It wasn't as much as I was expecting, which granted is kind of the MO for Scylla, right? Early on, it still bursts, but it's not going to be anywhere near as deadly as a late-game Scylla that comes through. Her passive as well playing into that as she levels up the abilities and maxes them out specifically. She gets a little bit more power on those, and that's going to be a big help.
Whoa, Mando Warrior stays alive. Kirmi blinked in, but a blink out for Mando keeps him in it. Cope stunned down behind the pillar.
What a pillar!
Once more by Diesel. What a play. What a chain of CC there for GTT. It looks like Cope actually had a pluck. And then Diesel stunned him against the wall. That chain of CC way too much for Oceans, and Ganta Tahiti pull back 1.
Something that only Onhurt is going to be able to bring you, right? Not any other hunter can stun you against the wall. That's the specific key phrase, right? Some other hunters can stun you, but he locks you down in a good position. And now Sops looking to potentially lock down Renjana. If that hammer connects, that's an easy kill, but unfortunately, it's just a little wide. But I think this showcases, one, Sops, I haven't seen a lot on Assassins lately, so that's a big change up.
9 turns blessing in, pin down, and Sops will end up falling. Kiermy trying to chase in here. Diesel just needs one more shot, and it's a double kill. A bit delayed there from Kiermy, but a kill nonetheless. And now Hugs and Kisses. You know, that's gone to Tahiti, starting up some of the brawling there in the long lane. Hugs and Kisses on a big rotation over are going to trade out ultimately what would be a 2-for-1.
Remember that thing I said a few minutes ago where I was like, man, this is surprisingly quiet and slow for a North American Challenger Cup game? That makes way more sense to me now. 4 kills that have just kind of cropped up in the matter of minutes here for them. A lot of aggression from Kiermy, and it really is, you know, around the taunt. Once that's online, it's easy setup, very good CC to help out someone like Merlin, as well as his Cerberus. Just 2 amounts of lockdown that really can cause trouble for Ganta Tahiti unless their beads are available. And honestly, all of them still have it, save for Sops. And so they maybe have the ability to escape them this time, but it's not going to work out everywhere.
Oh no, Mando pulled back in by the Stygian Torment, and Chronic will get the kill. Sops late to the party, dunks on in, might get a kill onto Oceans, but the double tap wide as the Cerberus is able to leap away. Hugs and Kisses just sort of outplaying the micro game here, Gore. The pressure all over the map has just been way too strong. Diesel into the Fields of Love, takes a tower shot. Renjaru trying to escape the lurking in the waters, but Cope has something else in mind, and suddenly this game catches fire. A kill over in the solo lane, a kill now in the duo lane, 1-for-1 across the map.
But you have to look where all the kills are going, right? Because you look at Hugs and Kisses, 2 kills onto Kiermy, the rest on solo and mid, and then Ganta Tahiti have been able to only find their kills over there in the duo lane. So there's a little bit of a turnaround. 1 onto the Hunter just now, 1 onto Oceans a little bit earlier, where they can turn that around and find that damage. Sybil, depending on how he's leveled it, so there's a way, depending on if you skip your ult, I believe at level 9, for Scylla to level up her 2, and you get that max damage, you get that passive going as well with that tier 1. But depending on whether or not he's done that, he really isn't going to have the same burst right now that you would really like to see out of a Scylla, just because we're only 8 minutes in.
Kiermy uses the 9 turns blessing for the heal, and a nice long-range pluck from Cope, but no stun on the follow-up from Sobs. Kiermy will not survive as Manda Warrior picks up the kill. Chronic with a triple knock up there, and then look at the stagger on the back end as well. Sops locked into the blue buff. Oh, but the hammer is enough. Keeps him alive. Oceans around the corner here is going to try to burn him away, but he does not have a leap. The wall will delay. Stygian Torment canceled out by I'm a Monster. Oceans needs some help. He's got everyone to 10 HP. But everyone over here is going to survive for the time being. Privative, Chronic are going to rotate in. But Gore, I don't think they're going to risk the dive.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you could say at least we got Cope, and you know, you traded out 1-for-1 in terms of supports, but you also lost your jungler. Kiermy died at the beginning of that one, even though they respawned by the time it is all said and done. And so still a kill ahead, and still 1,000 gold ahead. But Hugs and Kisses showcasing that it's not infallible as of right now, even though they have a pretty good team composition. It's been playing this early game very well. I think as Sops goes on, I like to use this a lot, but like you can usually tell like early on where things are a little uncomfortable, I guess is the right word for it. Like the walls are just a little off mark, and you're just like, okay, Sops is honestly just getting warmed up right now. Like it's kind of how it feels like, where you're just like, oh man, I missed a couple of abilities, whatever. By the end of the game, if this Thor is a little more on mark with his targeting, then it's going to change pace fast.
Kiermy plucked back in, down comes Sops, and down goes Kiermy. Spot on there, Goremizer. As Sops will use the Anvil of Dawn to pick up the kill. No chance there for Kiermy. The aggression has been well placed now for Ganta Tahiti. We talked a few moments ago about how Kiermy was red hot to start off this game, affecting 3 out of the 5 kills, and since then has died twice without being able to get anything back. And such is the case with the Erlang Shen. And, you know, we've seen what Cherio does at the SPL level. He's had, what, a penta and a couple of quads in the last 3 games that he's played this pick. But Cherio opts for a slightly different build, I think, Gore. There is some attack speed. Stone Cutting Sword is obviously a favorite, maybe where Kiermy's going here. But Crusher first item on the Erlang Shen obviously is going to be great for some of those abilities, maybe initial burst. But slightly delaying some of that attack speed and the shred that the Erlang Shen can use.
Yeah, a lot of what Erlang Shin brings that I think is a little more interesting than you'd see out of maybe the Assassins. Like the pin, his abilities, the damage they do aren't really where you're trying to showcase your kit, and a lot of it is in the auto attacks, and specifically the knock-up into attacking them, right? You lock them down with pin, then you go turtle form knock-up, then you just slap them until they're dead, and usually it comes out and pays for it, just like Oceans pays for that Fury with his life, but that's a worthwhile trade for them. And Dave, I think things like this, Kirmi doesn't have to feel too bad, but I want to see some of those more melee-centric items come online so that they can maintain this 2,000 gold lead and keep things going in their favor.
Kirmi now trying to be at the forefront. Uh-oh, Mando has already used some of his escape. There's the 9 turns blessing back in, but Mando not taking nearly as much damage, I think, as Kirmi expected. Mando turns it around. Is Chronic going to die as well? He will. How does he get away with that one? Berserker Shield, you can maybe thank that one. Mando Warrior turns around too.
I mean, that's one of the key items that has been working here for this set, is making it work out just because of its passive. I mean, hey, all of a sudden I'm close to dying. I'm going to hit you harder. It fit perfectly for what set's playstyle is, right? You're already getting some pin and attack speed. But literally, 20% attack speed and 20 physical power whenever you fall below your health threshold is insane to be able to pick up for someone like Set, who loves to go in, has a lot of survivability and escapability. And so for Mando and what we've seen up in the SPL, this feels like a shoo-in for what he's been able to pick up. And now he's going to be able to come through, and yeah, you have to look at that Kingslayer because the healing that can come through on it, maybe not as much as what you'll see out of something like what Erlang Shen is going to be bringing, but still enough to keep you alive and moving forward. And so you go in the threshold, get the bonus, pop out of the threshold, stay alive, which Diesel unfortunately is unable to do.
Gore, there's just too much going on all of a sudden all over the map. More auto attack based out of the set here. Like normally when we've seen it, you know, I think we've seen Hydra's first item, some Crusher out of the mid lane I think is a favorite first item. Mando's building this more in like an Amaterasu style, right? I mean, Berserker Shield for the attack speed, Frostbound just to stick on those targets. We're going to get a look at kind of the hybrid bruisery type set here, and apparently it's been working out. He turned around at 2v1, though Sops was there to help out as well. But, you know, the more this game starts to revolve around this set, maybe the more Ganta Tahiti is feeling comfortable. There was early pressure from Privative as well, and the Merlin suddenly hasn't maybe had as much to say in these recent few fights. 1-0-3 still good, and maybe some of why we haven't seen Merlin is you know, maybe itemization can feel sort of weird depending on what route you want to build him, but I like this mindset from Privative. You want to go for some early penetration, Spear the Magus makes sense, get some of that extra damage on a target if you're able to catch him out.
It looks like he's on another tier 2 Spear. I'm wondering if he's going to go Desolation. A lot of power on that item that can come through, and it would match over what Sybil has picked up. And honestly, it might help bring him back into the conversation. I mean, we haven't gotten to see a lot, like you had said, from him, except for those early games and that damage. Now, we're seeing Cope get aggressive.
Oh, too early on the Aegis, but does buy time for the cooldowns to come back. Oceans pulls back in Cope. He'll fall eventually. Kirmi with the taunt right back in. Sybil escapes this time. Sop still rotating in as well as Privative does the same from the mid lane. Anvil of Dawn will be channeled. So Sops and Sybil both escape in that red HP category, but watch out, Privative still here. Flicker, I think, still on cooldown. Range would be tough. Mando Warrior's low as well. Gore, I don't know what's going on here, but Hugs and Kisses, they pull back 3 and now 4 kills as the Flicker is off of cooldown, and Sybil will end up falling. Here we go.
Privative decided they could have gone through. Yeah, they might have been able to get this. I actually like this call a little bit more. Sops, level 13, who has been slightly behind Kirmi throughout this game, maybe has leveled it out, is not as worth as getting a tower, right? If you get that kill, cool, maybe you buy some time. Actually, another 20 seconds, 30 seconds without a jungler would be nice. But the tier 2 tower and left sounds a little bit better. The gold that you're going to get from this is going to be a little more massive for Hugs and Kisses now. A lot of good control throughout all of that, and I was actually surprised Ganta Tahiti looked like they were out, and then they stopped to get the red buff, and then they stopped to get the experience cams, and then they stopped to get the speed. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, if you're that low, and you don't have anywhere near the same ward coverage that we see out of Hugs and Kisses, especially that deep on that side of the map, you gotta get out of there. Just a little bit faster, you gotta run away. I think Sops was saving grace as being Thor early on and having enough survivability through the ult and the hammer to make sure that nothing truly bad happened to him.
Suddenly, the game has sort of been broken wide open by Hugs and Kisses, despite it being very even throughout the early portions here. It's only a 2-kill separation, but a almost 4,000 gold lead could get worse here. There is a collapse onto T's over Leaf, but it's only Chronix over the wall there. Renjaru will get that one. And right as the Oni Fury is spawning as well, Gore, we didn't really get to talk about it, of course, because all of the action starts to spring up, but definitely one thing Merlin provides is the ability to do some of these objectives early. Sops and Phil of Dawn on in. Hugs and Kisses will get the Fury and get Sops as well. I suppose you might just have to try there. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out, and the almost 4,000 gold lead becomes 5.
Well, I like where Sops' head is at, though, right? Like, I like watching teams, when the kills are this explosive, it's 17 minutes in, get aggressive, see if you can do it. Well, yeah, I mean, there's certain points where your life, especially, again, a level down as a jungler, haven't maybe been able to make a huge difference just yet. It's worthwhile throwing it away to see if you can seal it out of here.
Nando sidesteps the taunt from Kirby, but cannot sidestep the damage. Oni waves just now reaching that midway point. Tier 2 tower in mid goes down. Open Phoenix on the left side and in the mid. Of course, could be an early FG call, but Hugs and Kisses probably reaching that point. You got a Merlin on your side as well as some other good objective shredders. Could be an FG call here shortly if Hugs and Kisses can find a pick or two.
If I could get my way and I'm Hugs and Kisses, I want Scylla dead, though, right? Before I go into that, and I'm a monster, just because you don't have the same burst that you need, Merlin's great for burning down objectives. We talked about that a lot at the beginning of the year, and he will shred a fire giant faster than most people would recognize. But Sybil could very easily walk up, press 4, click, and steal it away at the last second if you don't play too carefully for them. And while I do like things being a little loosey-goosey, I don't mind it if they don't play strictly to the rules, right? I do mind if you're going to end up giving an objective away for free on something that could be very telegraphed. I think killing off Sybil, especially at this point, isn't going to be too hard. 2 levels down on the jungle and 2 levels down in mid, so you've got the level advantage on anybody that would need to then lock down this mid laner. That makes it a little bit easier. And I mean, earlier we were talking about it. Mando's got a good few kills to him. Diesel's got a good few kills to him, but that seems to be where the focus from Hugs and Kisses are right now. I mean, they're slaughtering.
Of course, Sybil's damage is woefully low. Got 2,500. Lowest in the game, 1,500 behind Cope on the Sobek, and the majority of that Sobek damage is probably lurking in the waters and in the burst that provides on the back end. This Scylla has just not been able to find, I think, what he's looking for. A sudden 1,000 burst, though, onto Oceans. That'll be helpful. Sops there to clean up the kill this time around. Mando Warrior makes it 2. Chronic has a double knockup on the back line, has gone to Tahiti, trying to rush away from the cool column that's rotated over. Got to Tahiti, find a couple of picks, but Kirmi starting to swing as well, and Sops caught a bit out. And Hugs and Kisses will pull back at least 1.
And you can see, again, a lot of the attack speed in this build is helping him out because he's just slaughtering people. Unfortunately, Scylla does the burst, and now has almost double the amount of damage that Sybil had coming into there.
Chronic is going to get plucked in as well, just too separated right now. It feels like Hugs and Kisses are. Mando Warrior will add another. Gore, that is a massive swing in this game. The gold lead still very far apart. In the XP as well. I mean, it's absolutely not backbreaking for Hugs and Kisses, but as far as just general momentum, it seems like that's exactly what Ganta TD have been looking for.
And they find a lot of worthwhile kills. Again, you lose Sops, which I think is actually super unfortunate. Your jungler is barely... Well, he's behind enough from Kirmi and ahead enough of the supports that he's in that weird, I want to say, like, uncanny valley of levels where it's just like you're not useless, but you're not useful as of it. Like, you're finding a lot of kills, but you really do feel like a utility machine as opposed to the guy that we're relying on for the kills. You're setting up Mando Warrior and not yourself here, which, honestly, if Sops is willing to do it, that's the playstyle that you can get out of a Thor. I think more importantly is that, you know, we had highlighted it, Sybil literally doubles his damage in that fight. If he starts hitting these Emma monsters, it's game over for Hugs and Kisses. It's just going to be so much damage.
Mando Warrior will escape with his life this time. Nearly goes down. Ocean's used his ultimate, stunned out though by Sops, so Mando likely saved by his jungler here. What's the call by Hugs and Kisses? You have forced Mando to go back to base. If you wanted to do FG, you might have needed to immediately start it up. They wait a moment, so Mando Warrior effectively right back into this fight, though he doesn't have his ultimate. Fire Giant being looked at by Hugs and Kisses. Started up, half HP on the objective. Got to Tahiti largely in the mid lane as Mando Warrior gets taunted back in by Kirmi here. Kirmi is going to receive a heal, but now the 9 turns Blessing not available. Still waiting for the Stygian Torment for Oceans to come back up as well, and I think smartly Gore Hugs and Kisses will back away from the Fire Giant.
I think they were looking for a bait, and you see the ult. Kirmi is ready to lock down Mando, knows that the Kingslayer is not available, and then recognizes that it's not gonna be that easy. He's still a solo laner. He has a little bit of an item on you. Until those Shinsais are finished here for Kirmi, he's gonna have to be a little more patient on the tanks and really stick to Sob, Sybil, even Diesel, who's been able to shred pretty consistently so far. And so there's a little bit of question about gold spending, where it's going to be, pressure and where it's going to be. I mean, Gold Fury's up over there on the left-hand side, an easy objective for Gone to Tahiti to maybe try and sneak. That Fire Giant, especially with Pyromancer coming up, is very tantalizing to everybody in the game. At this point, when you know, especially for Hugs and Kisses, that you can absolutely decimate whatever is in that Fire Giant pit, it opens up that conversation for you.
Or you mentioned the Gold Fury, and it's going to get done here by Gone to Tahiti. Nobody from Hugs and Kisses, I don't think, makes it in time. So that is a great Fury as well. A 6k lead shrinks down to about 4k just off of one objective. So good there for the blue side. Maybe a fight starting to get forced here. Cope goes in, flex back Privative. The Merlin uses Aegis and then swoops off to the side to help out with some damage. Taunt back in onto Sapsa. 2-for-1 trade. Now becomes 3-for-1 as Hugs and Kisses will start to sweep through Gone to Tahiti. It's Sops who landed in the midst of all of the Hugs and Kisses damage. And Gore, these are long death timers.
Obnoxiously so. Unfortunately for, I want to say Hugs and Kisses, Sops is still alive, but I think fortunately for him, only Sops is still alive. I mean, you've got 20 seconds left. You might be able to break down this Phoenix. They have some good damage. Going for the Titan might be too much. It all depends on Sops here.
Oh no, Sops immediately goes down. The Titan is going to have to get it done all on his own. And he does not have the legs to get it done. 23-39 into the game. Hugs and Kisses will take game 1.
I don't think that could have been more well-timed there for Sops. Just unfortunate positioning. You have to laugh about it, where it's just, you're one lonely Thor. What can you do? You can wall, you can hammer, you can spin, and then that's it. There's not much else that you have going forward with it. There's 5 people there, so your passive is definitely going to be helping a little bit, but unfortunately it wasn't enough damage, as you had pointed out, to be able to lock anyone down, and then the Titan couldn't just get it all done on his own. I think just kind of explosive. I mean, I was wondering if they were going to grab Phoenix, go back to Fire, but it was that awkward, we have just enough time to play with here that we can get aggressive. So let's try it. I was worried they weren't going to have the damage to really follow through, but that Titan fell rather quickly.
Hugs and Kisses, I mean, it is back and forth there in the middle, but eventually a lead just sort of explodes. I was nervous Mando Warrior was just going to start to take that game over after the turnaround we saw in the solo lane. I think just more consistent on all the damage output from Hugs and Kisses this time around. A quick one, 23 minutes into the game, Hugs and Kisses take game 1. Stick around, we'll be right back for game 2. It's a quick one for Hugs and Kisses here in Game 1,
Yeah.
isn't it, Gormizer? And a team that hasn't won in the SEC yet. They're looking like a complete squad, at least after one game. I loved what I saw, I think, from top to bottom there. Some small skirmishing over in the duo lane, but Gore everywhere else on the map, at least early, seemed to be under the control of Hugs and Kisses. A little pushback from GTT, but ultimately just better team fighting, I think, from the winning squad.
And we'll have to see, I think, going forward, specifically if Ganta Tahiti keep up with these changes they've made and the
Sure.
kind of mid 3v3 lineup that they have, switching roles for Sob, Sybil, and Cope, all three of them swapping places. Because if they keep that similar in Game 2, then that just indicates to me that they're trying something new, right? They're trying to swap things around and maybe get people more comfortable where they can feel maybe more impactful. In which case, you don't expect to win in the first set that you play with a swap like that, right? You just expect to try and push them to a limit. Granted, 24 minutes-ish is not necessarily the limit for a lot of these teams, so maybe you want to clean things up going into the next one. Hugs and Kisses, on the other hand, they had a good draft. They had good damage. I mean, you can see 3 people above 17,000. One of those 3 is above 18,000. Privative has a really good early game that transitions well for this Merlin.
Oh, yeah.
And considering we talked about him so much in picks and bans, it was nice to see him have that level of impact. And the same thing can be said, I think, for Kiermi. If you're going to top pick an Erlang Shen, you've got to have that level of play for it to make sure it works out.
Yeah, there's kind of that one speed bump in like the mid game where Kiermi just got killed off in a couple of fights, and it looked like Ganta Tahiti might have the legs to push this game a little bit longer. But ultimately, once some of those auto attack based items came online for this Erlang Shen, I think he was just way too difficult to deal out. There's effectively no winning lane for Ganta Tahiti here, 15, 20 minutes in. Maybe no gap wider. I don't want to continue to pour on Sybil, but Sybil just 300 damage higher than his Sobek support. 23 minutes into the game, he was at like 5,600 or something like that, tripled up effectively by Privative out of the mid lane, so maybe no damage gap wider there. But that is Game 1 by the wayside. GTT, a chance to turn things around. Picks and bans for Game number 2 will tell us maybe a little bit more, Gormizer. I think the bans were effectively standard-ish. I mean, very SSG feeling. I think we mentioned with the Aphrodite and the Hell being banned out. Yeah. And then both teams, maybe more so, Hugs and Kisses, felt like they were just kind of drafting comfort. I mean, it felt like they had a draft that they felt a little bit better about. You know, we hadn't seen the Scylla all that often. That one was kind of out of left field, I think. So I don't know if there's all that much to change if you're Hugs and Kisses here, if GTT are going to let you get something similar.
And you can see, as long as you look down there, is the fact that Hell, Aphrodite, both in the top 3 of bans against Hugs and Kisses. So once again, they're going to stay up there. And they're good picks that come through. They can be game-changing in the right hands. And based on what we saw last time for Privative, I would expect them to be able to play that, right? But you have to wonder, at least in my mind, what Hugs and Kisses are going to ban. And this is just where I get to maybe go on a mini rant of if you're in first pick, I don't think you should have to ban any of the top gods, because for the most part you want them. Like if I'm playing Ganta Tahiti here, I want the Umoja. Although again, there is always that comfort level. I do think that at October of this year you should have a Umoja under your belt. But I actually like the way they shift this up. They ban the Umoja. They let the Cthulhu, the Kuzenbo all get banned on the other side. But this time they scoop away the Erlang Shen to make sure that you won't have the exact same performance out of Kiermi.
Or I think we need like just a soundbite that is one of us casters saying you need to have a Umoja. That way we can just kind of press a button. I know you have your GG button. We need you need to have a Umoja button that we can just press in all of these drafts. You're not wrong. But at this point, it's you got to have one. And we need to stop telling you that you need to have one. Not that that is necessarily the case here. Obviously, GTT realizing that Hugs and Kisses have one on their side, maybe just don't want to deal with it, realizing the Erlang Shen is very strong. I think that's a smart first pick. Gore, they're going to go back to the On Her, though. Didn't find much in Game 1. There were some small outplays, I think, over in the duo lane, but got soloed out by this Cupid a couple of times, maybe once or twice throughout that game. You know, I admire the tenacity, but do we admire them sticking with the On Her, I think is a different question.
Sobek Cupid feels like it's just going to be a more effective kill lane this early on. There's a lot that I think, you know, On Her can bring, but we saw that, like you said, even though he was able to find a couple of good trades, Diesel did end up I think he went like to the point where it was maybe 3-1, and then ended up 3-4, 3-5 as time went on. Just wasn't able to find those late game kills as Hugs and Kisses kind of ran away with the rest of the game. Geb comes through and I think helps early on, just because CC immunity helps you dodge things like the pluck, can help you get out of the mez that Cupid is going to bring with his ult, or potentially the stun from the heart bomb. All of that comes through and gives you a nice little shield on top of it to make sure you can stay alive for it. So it feels like they're putting a little more weight on keeping On Her alive, but it does still feel like they're missing something, and a lot of it does come back to the conversation we were having at the beginning of this, looking at the end of last game, but that's Sybil, what Sybil is playing, how much damage Sybil is doing, and, you know, more importantly, like if it's the Scylla, are the I'm a Monsters connecting, because On Her can do a lot, Erlang Shin can do a lot, but they can't do it all on their own, unless I guess your name is Johnny and you're playing Erlang, because then I trust him to play anything there for Belt Slap. But for the most part, you still need a good lineup beside you and behind you to make sure that these carries can carry the way they need to. Geb is going to help enable it, but there's still a little bit more, I think, that's necessary to make them go over the top and win.
So there already are a couple pivots here in this draft, Gore. A lot of what we've already mentioned. Erlang Shen switching sides, On Her sticks there, Geb a big change. And now the Morgan as well, presumably out of mid. I suppose we've seen her flex around just a little bit, but I think the safe bet would be mid, but maybe not here, Gore. If it ends up being On Her, Morgan, and Kronos, is that On Her, obviously in the duo lane, Kronos mid, Morgan solo? We see a Morgan solo lane here?
Now, if they're switching back, Sops has been playing a lot of Kronos mid. I would assume Diesel would still take On Her carry. If I was going to make a swap, it's either Morgan solo, like you said, or maybe, again, I think I said this the other day, you could try to lean her in the jungle. She does play very Assassin-esque. There's a lot about her that is comparable to some of the other Assassins, but I don't know if that's where her clear is going to be best. I don't know if that's where you're going to see her. We see her a ton in mid where she's comfortable. Maybe it's a Kronos solo, right, that can come through. But I think it just changes up my mind for wherever the MO. I mean, Mando Warrior's not playing a Guardian anymore unless he's taking Geb over there, and then everything's topsy-turvy, and I have no idea what's going on. Geb solo, I'm not going to go into, but it has been big in the past, and we've seen it win some games, so there's always the propensity for that. Let's just say Ganda Tahiti have a very versatile draft, to say the least, and I just am excited to see where they end up sending it. Hugs and Kisses have a very straightforward draft that kills you dead very quickly. I think going from Erlang to a Wheelish is going to be a good swap. I think the King Arthur is very good. The Thoth is very good. Everything that they did to round out this roster makes me think that they're going to control a lot of the portions of this game.
Gore, I mean, the Hugs and Kisses draft is just more obvious, I think, to us as far as here's where all these picks go. We know these picks work in this role, and that, I think, just by nature is going to maybe make us feel a little bit more comfortable. But sometimes you got to get uncomfortable to improve and get better, and maybe that's exactly what GTT are looking for here. Gore, they're going to have a lot of damage off of the top. We'll have to jump into the game to really see where all of these picks move. It's time for GTT to bounce back after a 23-minute win from Hugs and Kisses in game number 1. Gore, why don't we answer a few of these questions
Kronos
for ourselves
jungle.
here.
Show
See
it
where you say, Kronos jungle. No, it is Mando Warrior on the Morgan out of this solo lane. Cope, of course, will be on the Kronos mid. Diesel. I don't think ever any big questions surrounding the On Her being over in that duo lane. So, do we think Morgan solo is something that could work?
Yeah, of the lineup they have here, I do not think the Morgan solo is going to be where any of the disconnects start to happen for them. Although, there's maybe a shake-up. We'll have to watch Mando closely to see how it goes, specifically against King Arthur, because that doesn't feel like it's going to be a very fun match for him. Either way, I think it's something you can get away with. They did another swap-up. Sybil's now in the jungle. Cope is now in mid. Sops is now on support. I mean, they're doing a little shuffle on the side of Ganda Tahiti. And I had mentioned that I've seen a ton of Sops Kronos mid. I don't think I've seen a single Cope Kronos mid that comes through for them. I already can say that he's starting off the same way Sops did, going into a book build. Doesn't look like he's going to give too much about the rings until maybe later on in the game, which is different than what you would expect if you saw him over here in the long lane. But this feels like it might honestly go even better for Hugs and Kisses because of the other swaps.
There's already beads used by Privative there in mid. Looks like he maybe thought either there's going to be enough damage to turn around and kill him, or if he could avoid the stun, he would have enough damage to grab the kill onto Cope. Neither of those two things happens, though the beads does happen. So those are down as both junglers will make their way over to the mid lane. Mando already about a half level behind here. Sops stunned down over in the long lane. I'm not sure if Ocean still has the pluck or not. Would have been risky at level 2 to dive underneath that tower. So Ranjaru and Ocean score. We figured this would be the way the pressure is pushing in this lane. And it's already the case as Ranjaru and Oceans have Sops down to half.
And perpetually down here. Look, Geb got a little bit of a buff recently to help his early game clear, and his clear just in general, because it used to be the way that your shockwave works. Damage right up front, it's all there. Unfortunately, damage at the long range isn't there. Oceans, this is a kill lane. You have a Wheelish over there. You're expecting first bloods like that. But I'm wondering if they're going to be able to make up for anything. I don't know. This doesn't feel like a game that Gone to Tahiti are going to be able to stabilize easily. If they fall too far behind too fast, Dave, then it could just all go downhill from there.
I think that's like a perfect take notes moment where like Oceans and Ranjaru could have gone a little bit extra, a little bit more all out trying to finalize that kill onto Sops, but obvious communication lines there with the team, realizing Kierme's going to be over there shortly. And then make it the easy kill, right? But before you end up going too far forward. There's a pluck onto Sops. We're going to take a quick pause, sort out some of the stuttering you guys might be seeing before we jump back into game here. And a great start for Hugs and Kisses, Gore. I admire some of the not the passiveness, the cautiousness maybe is what I'm looking for out of that duo lane, and making sure everything starts off well for him.
And I think what you're going to see is, and kind of like we alluded in picks and bans, it's a very straightforward draft that just is a very straightforward style of play, right? I mean, there's not a lot to it to read into. Sobek Cupid, he's going to try to pluck you into Heart Bomb. They're going to get a kill because of the damage, right? If a Wheelish is there, she's going to Feather Step, or she's going to pull you in off of the pluck. You go over to mid, Thoth, he just shoots you from long range. He doesn't need to be in the fight, right? He does a lot of damage without having to get there. King Arthur's a bully. I mean, everything they've got, again, is exactly as you read it. And so that gives a little bit of an advantage to Gone to Tahiti, because that says this is like, we know what we're playing against. We know what we're getting into. And so if we can play against those styles, it will work. The downside is that your composition, specifically because of Chronos, takes way longer to get online. I mean, we were talking about Scylla not doing much damage. Yes, you could still get 5,000 damage before 23 minutes as Chronos, but you're not going to be hitting that hard until the 23-minute mark, right? You need that late game capabilities.
Well, Sops, remember, we rejoined, or we left rather, with Sops being plucked back and nearly dies again. Diesel now is going to get stunned down. It seems like this is where all of the action will be flowing early on into this game. Is it Hindu man that loves Geb? Isn't Hindu like the
He is a Geb main
guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's probably good he's not watching this game right now, Gore. There's just not enough turnaround output. I mean, you're going to have to pull Cope over to help you out with your purple buff, realizing Hugs and Kisses are going to 4-man rotate, I guess, over to the purple, pluck back in onto Diesel. Kierme there with the knock-up, the root down. Diesel will leap away, pick up the purple on his way out. The body block's nearly enough. I guess all things considered, you get your purple and you don't die, and you waste a little time from Hugs and Kisses, so thumbs up.
And yeah, at the end of the day, like you said, you're wasting a little bit of time. You're making sure they don't run away with it. Only 300 gold separating them as of right now, and that means they've cut away some of that first blood bounty that Gone to Tahiti, or that, I guess, Hugs and Kisses got off Gone to Tahiti. But again, I'm always stressed out. I look down, I see Cope on Chronos. I see anyone on Chronos right now, and I get a little stressed. But I see it, and it's just because of his passive. Chronos, I think his kit is incredibly fun. It's very safe. I love playing him. But when you read his passive, it literally tells you that the longer the game goes, the more powerful you are. You have to wait. Like, you get power as you go forward. And so a lot of it is balanced around that, right? So at base level, 5 minutes in, as we approach that mark, you're not doing as much. You're really just set up and a little bit of, side damage for your team, as opposed to late game. I mean, late game, this guy hits like a truck. He will shred a carry, he will shred a tank, he will shred a tower, he'll shred a fire giant. Just put something in front of him and he'll kill him.
This is what we saw a few times in game 1. Diesel just eating a heart bomb. Diesel is going to get plucked back in now by Renjaru. Sops blinks through, provides a shield, but the body blocks so good from Oceans. Look at the double stun there from Renjaru. Could be a double kill opportunity.
Nope.
So the Geb is great at rolling away. And now Diesel will fall very far behind. 2 levels already on this Cupid. Gore, this is just natural lane pressure that we're seeing here. There is a transformation. Fields of Love down from Mando Warrior, who has transformed here, but Kirmi turns around, goes back in. I'm not sure what Mando's looking for there. Hugs and kisses, they left the blue buff until Mando went back in. Now they're going to get a kill and go right back and finally complete the invade.
And if you want to really know where that kill came from, it's the dash in from Mando as opposed to the dash or anything else, right? You maybe get some damage, you maybe have it. That ult comes through. The minute you dash forward, though, is the go button. That makes it so easy for Hugs and Kisses to lock you down.
Well, unfortunately, Privative is only going to be able to do some damage as his dying wish there. But now Sybil being looked at by Oceans. Quick look at the minimap tells me nobody is over here, so I'm not sure what Oceans is looking for. He's going to get knocked up, stunned, and killed off. Hugs and Kisses was nowhere to be seen there. Maybe there's an opportunity for a little bit of burst, but yeah, Sobek does not do that much damage, Gore, as much as support mains wish he would.
And unfortunately there for Oceans, like you said, it just kind of leads to an inevitable, I want to just call it an int. Like, I mean, there's, like you said, no one was nearby. You have to have that kind of communication going on at that point. I think he thinks he has a little bit more damage, maybe not expecting the full rotation from Gaunt to Tahiti to come through and just slaughter him right afterward. But you got to know your limits, and I think that maybe puts a little bit more of a cap on there to let you know where your limits are going to be as a Sobek. Between him and Privative, those 2 kills, you know, Privative is the most important one, but because of where they go, an assist now there for the duo lane, 1 on Sops, 1 on Diesel, helps equalize a little bit. Instead of 2 levels down, they're just 1 level down, or now in the support role, they're a little bit even, or closer to even. But getting a kill on a Privative, I mean, look at it, there's a 2-level gap there in mid. Cope is doing wonderfully so far in terms of farm and surviving as of right now. His ultimate, that rewind, is really going to be solid at making sure he can potentially get out of trouble fast. It does have that wind-up time, and we've seen a countless Kronos die while they're trying to channel their ult at the very beginning. So that's something that Sops, or I'm sorry, now that Cope is going to have to worry about. I'm so used to Sops being on this Kronos. But other than that, I think they're pretty well off here for Gaunt.
Sybil uses the beads, and then the 9 turns Blessing to pull back a couple members of Hugs and Kisses. Privative sends the final judgment just a bit wide. Cope rotating in as well from the mid lane. Kirmi, oh, it's a 3-man stun from Sops, but it's not enough to get the kill. Sybil is going to transform, but look at the blink away from Kirmi. The pin wide, but it's made Kirmi step back in. Cope will detonate the ground to finally get the kill onto the Wheelix, but Kirmi nearly got out of that one alive. There is a stun onto Chronic, but that one won't result in much. Bit of a skirmish there on the jungle. Gore ends up as a 1-for-1.
And honestly, Kirmi dying, again, it's probably worth a little bit more overall for Gaunt Tahiti to get rid of that player than it is anything Hugs and Kisses can pick up. But at the same time, H&K over there, I think Kirmi does a lot and stays alive way longer than you would expect, showcasing that he could be a part of it. Honestly, as 1 feather step, 1 auto attack from being able to potentially find a kill onto Mando as well. So there was a little more of an opening for them to maybe go 2-for-1, depending on Kirmi. But I like the jukes a little bit better because they look cool when they come through. Unfortunately for him, Cope just happened to be able to cut off the path at the right moment. And so far, again, this Kronos 2-0 in 1, I should say, is doing well. A level up in mid, but he's also getting himself a lot of farm right now. That is helping get this build online a little bit faster. It's going to take a while going for the book build, just because you're going to have to stack everything. But you're already late game, so you know that you're playing for a certain minute in the game. Might as well get whatever items you need to stack them up to get to that portion anyway.
Especially after the slow early game that Cope had. Privative slow as well. Remember the rotation, spent a little bit of time trying to gank over into the duo lane, but ended up not resulting in anything for Hugs and Kisses. So, getting this Kronos feeling comfortable early, going to be very important to move forward into this game. Both junglers as well, Gore, have had decent impact early on here. There's a gravity surge right off of the pluck, and that's going to be an easy kill onto Sybil. And right as I mention it, Kirmi is the jungler who provides a little bit more action. 4 out of 5 affected kills for the Wheelix, and Sybil now falls a couple levels behind.
Unfortunate overall for the jungle. We've seen what Erlang Shin can do, going for a much more standard build. Didn't go for that Crusher first, the same way Kirmi has a second time in a row. But has that stone cutting. Those autos can be debilitating if you get knocked up right prior. It makes it easy for Sybil to potentially find some kills. But if you're getting shut down, even somewhat consistently, or at least knocked around so that you can't stay in the fight, then you don't expect him to see him too much on the other side of the kill feed, trying to find some of them. Although right now it's Cope who continues getting aggressive. I love the way he's playing this Chronos. He has almost no care in the world, and it's paying off.
I mean, if he can set up something like this, which is a 9 turns blessing into a stun onto Kirmi, and Cope will pick up the kill. It's a pluck on back from Oceans, lurking in the water, maybe waiting for that shield to time out, but not quick enough to get back in onto Sybil's. Cope, he's dove the tier 1 tower. In the meantime, a double kill now, and Oceans is left alone. A big swing now for Ganta Tahiti, but the shielding saves Sybil, keeps him in the fight a little bit longer. Could be a 3-kill swing for Cope out of mid if he just hits a couple more abilities. Maybe the auto attacks will get it done, and now Cope is rampaging at 501.
You know, there's a lot of good, a little bit of bad there that comes in hand with picking up a Geb. But one of the best things is that shield that comes through. Sybil is already going to have a little bit of healing. Cope has a little bit of survivability. But Sops has the distinct ability to just straight up say, you cannot kill this person. It is not going to happen. And it forces you into this position. I mean, when we see big shields in Smite, the one thing that should come to your mind is Sunder. But do you really get a Sunder for Geb shield? I mean, it's on such a fast cooldown that it almost feels useless. Because yes, you'll destroy one of them. And if you don't get that kill immediately, he's just going to use it a few seconds later and, again, protect them. And so there's options for them to build into to help deal with that. But I think at the end of the day, you're going to see Hugs and Kisses want something. I mean, my mind starts to shift to the attack speed tree, the pin tree, to help burn through a lot of those health bars. But it looks more as though we're getting some maces online, at least for Rinjaru. Same thing. Kirmi going a much more just kind of standard assassin build. So maybe it's on to Privative at this point to do the burst damage to get rid of the shields.
Yeah, Privative held in check. The opposite of what we saw in game number 1. As Cope returns to the mid lane, has a good performance so far. Sops rolls in. Look out for a stun on the back end. He's got 2. It's Chronic and Oceans who are stunned on down, and then stunned again is Chronic, but he'll spring right back up. Cope detonates Kirmi, uses the ultimate, and that'll pull him right on back. Ocean's being whittled away, and Ganta Tahiti might be able to find another kill here. It is the route from Sybil onto Privative. Mando Warrior finally cleans up Oceans, and now the rotation in onto Privative, who has no chance at staying alive. The Morrigan now, a double kill to start to come online here in this game. Hugs and Kisses nearly swept once again.
Now, Cope is,
oh no,
how do you say, the reason Ganta Tahiti are winning, I think is the proper way to word it. Rinjaru here in danger. Good knock-up from Sops. Yeah, Diesel gets the kill, but that's a good knock-up from Sops that helps continue setting this up. This Geb, I think, is a big portion of this, but Cope is the biggest portion of this. I mean, he's 6-0-3, 9 out of 10 kills. He's got a literal 90% ratio here of kill participation. So great from him to make this Chronos work. And a time where Chronos isn't really seen that highly. I mean, he doesn't necessarily do well in the first 15 minutes, or he's not supposed to, right, on paper. And a lot of teams are leaving him to the wayside. This is something that Ganta Tahiti have been picking up pretty regularly all year. And all year, they've been one of the only teams to make it work out in mid and have it be consistent. Granted, sometimes it's consistently great, sometimes it's consistently bad. This just happens to be one of those great moments for them. As it comes through. And they've been on the winning side of it, at least making it look good. It's either, you know, I want to say even or abysmal. And so being 6-0-3 is fantastic for Cope.
Well, Kirmi, after a rocket launch of an early game, has really been slowed down here. Though Hugs and Kisses entirely have as well. But the Wheelix was the driving force, I think, of a lot of the pressure that we saw early. Ocean's now trying to do the same. Diesel a bit late on the beads. Will leap away, but there's the gravity surge. That's why you pick the Wheelix into the on her. Sops is going to roll himself away. Gore, we are on it today, right? When I talk about Kirmi slowing down a little bit, he makes a play over in the solo, or the duo lane.
They invest a lot, though. I mean, you get Lurking in the Waters, Fields of Love, and the Gravity Surge. Kirmi pulling anyone in all for 1 kill, which I guess is worthwhile at the end of the day because you still get the kill, but you invest so much, so heavily over there. And now you have to look at some of the other ults. King Arthur's going to have his back relatively soon. But Chronic, making these rotations, if they can get good setup, they can turn this around. But honestly, Cope and Mando, they don't have much to worry about right here.
That's tough for Chronic. I mean, he walks in, he has to go Genji's Guard and Reinforced Greaves with his first 2 items. Obviously, between Mando and Cope, it's going to be a lot of magical damage pouring into him. But that's one rotation from Cope and then an auto attack with the Polynomicon did what? Just over half of Chronic's HP? That's supposed to be a King Arthur. He's supposed to survive all that easily. But that just really shows you, I think, the power of this 4-level lead for Cope out of the mid lane. No surprise, 6-0-3 at this point. Top damage in the game by about 1.2k. Mando just behind. Slow start, admittedly, for Sybil in the damage department, but done a good job in setting up for the rest of his team. And now the most recent thing that'll get set up is the Gold Fury. Kirmi is here. Does have a Gravity Surge. Gold Fury taken down by Gauntlet Tahiti. Sops rooted on in. Gravity Surged back by Kirmi. But now he's used his rotations for a kill on to the Geb. And maybe that's the cue for Hugs and Kisses to back away.
So I'm trying to think of other ways to say it. Although Sybil going to get aggressive, make me pause that thought as he goes in against 4. This doesn't seem like a good idea, but they're not doing enough damage to make him regret it.
Privative uses the Aegis to keep himself in it. Might have been a kill regardless there for Sybil if the Aegis wasn't up. Privative has done good damage. He's the one who's about 1,000 damage behind Cope despite a 3-level lead. So definitely the power of the Thoth. They haven't found their, they found their way pretty consistently onto Privative, 1/3 of the deaths so far, just under it, I suppose. But that's so important. You look at the raw compositions that are starting to rise up a little bit. The Thoth compositions, I think, feel sort of that same idea. The ability to get in there into the backline, so important. I think Gauntlet Tahiti have that ability between, a Morrigan, a taunt, a pin, whatever it might be, a rollout from Sops. I think Privative might have a tough time staying alive here in some of these fights.
Not only that, but you've seen it like both relics having to be used pretty close to each other consistently in all of these fights. And what I was going to call out, I haven't really liked the final judgments. I've seen a few of them just go wide, and that's always going to happen, right? Sometimes you just miss, but some of them just aren't being used against targets that I think are maybe more worthwhile, right? Right there, right? If there's a fight with Privative there's a good chance he final judgments the already dead on her. I think that's what happened there in the Gold Fury fight. If Geb is already dead because of 4 of your teammates, you don't really need to launch that ult, and you can save it instead to try and launch damage into 1, maybe 2 members if they stack up on the side of Gauntlet Tahiti. That can change the pace of a fight. That's the way we've seen SSG picking it up, or specifically Sanguine, I should say, that have been picking it up. Shinto has been making this Thoth look really good in the Pro League, and it's mainly because of his capabilities of hitting 2 to 3 people with 1 final judgment in the middle of a fight. All of a sudden, everyone's at half health. It definitely makes it easier for your team to win. I don't think they've necessarily been abysmal so far, but if Privative cleans those up, same way I was saying Sybil to clean up those I'm a Monsters last game, if they change and start being the impactful ult we know it can be, then that's a great in for Hugs and Kisses. It lets Kirmi and Rinjaru have some easy late game potential carries because they only have to do half the damage. The other half is coming from Privative.
Yeah, Privative realizing he's going to have to play catch-up here. Maybe that extra bit of urgency opens up the door to some ultimates that might not otherwise be used. Regardless of all of that, a lot of pressure still being put from Hugs and Kisses over here into this long lane. They have not attempted to punish this Morgan at all. Sops and Diesel, I think, privy to this. Maybe not. That Kirmi is here as well. Gravity Surge, but it's onto Sops. The Geb, so survivable here. Not enough damage from Privative just yet. Double shielding keeps Sops alive, but the Heart Bomb will detonate for some decent damage. Not enough to get rid of Sops here. There's a final judgment sent soaring, and it won't be much. And look at Cope. Look at the way he's feeling now. He just kind of walks in, nearly gets the kill onto Kirmi. Ocean's probably going to sacrifice himself here. He sure does, and Cope improves to unstoppable 19 minutes in.
It's 7-0-3. Now he's not, math, 10 of the 11 kills that come through, and it's going to be solid for him. Gauntlet Tahiti looking really solid. Again, maybe all through this Kronos, if he goes down early in a fight, I wonder how the rest of it will look for their team. I think Mando, Sybil, Diesel aren't doing poor at all. I think Cope just happens to be the one who is getting the spotlight shown on him. I think everybody else is having a pretty big hand in making sure this works out for him. Especially when you look at the 6 assists there for Sybil or the 7 assists there for Sops. It's a lot of setup to make sure this mid laner is getting what he needs. But now he's got Spear of Desolation. He started up a ring. I mean, Kronos is getting to that late game portion, and that's a dangerous game to be playing if you're Hugs and Kisses.
You know, Gore, I didn't say it before it happened, but my next point was going to be that it's been pretty quiet on the right-hand side of the map up to this point, where it feels like maybe there's the ability to capitalize on a somewhat squishy target. Not even really somewhat. I mean, Mando's just building this like a mage out of the solo lane and has been able to stay alive. Early on, remember, I was concerned at how much damage Chronic still took. Just had the Genji's guard, now has a Glad Shield and the Oni's Hunter, or the Oni Hunter's garb on his side. I mean, he's now Chronic is now maybe in a point where he's the one who can start going big in some of these fights against all of the damage that is on Ganta Tahiti, and it's 2 magic dealers right now.
I mean, yeah, getting in, locking down Kronos. So the thing is if Chronic goes in on Kronos, Cope is going to have enough time to get the ult off and kind of regenerate all that health.
It's true.
If Chronic goes in with Kirmi, Cope will die before that ult can be used. That's, I think, the key in dealing with the mid. Mando, unless he ults into Kronos to then ult and then try and get out, which is already convoluted just as a thought process, I don't think he's going to be able to be given the same grace. I think Chronic, more or less, is going to be able to control that matchup just because of that.
Now there's a fight happening in the mid lane. Chronic is here. Finally, Cope goes down, and it's Kirmi who gets the bounty. That's a big chunk of change that makes its way over into the Hugs and Kisses wallets now. Sops is going to get knocked up, and then Fields of Love. There's Privative. Finally, a final judgment. Will lock in a kill now. Sybil turns around 1, a stun down onto Sops as Chronic continues his chase in onto the backline. It's going to be a 3-for-1 swing for Hugs and Kisses. Gore, they group as 5, and for the first time it feels like Hugs and Kisses were the ones driving the fight.
And I'd say incredibly worthwhile. Privative gets a really good final judgment, and admittedly, I don't want to say it this way, but he's, outside of the support, the one that is the most available, I think, to die for your team, right? He's 1-4, he's level 17, 2 levels down. It doesn't mean as much to you if you lose this Thoth. You do lose some of your burst damage and maybe confirm around these objectives, but you'll take it with a grain of salt, right? Because guess what happens in place of that? Oh, that's right. Kirmi gets a kill onto Cope. You said not only just a big chunk of change in their favor, but levels. I mean, 3 levels up, just now hitting level 20 there for Kirmi. This is great positioning for your jungle to be in, to be able to get aggressive. Highest level in the game as of right now, tied up there with Chronic, which means these two can be the powerhouse Hugs and Kisses need to bully their way back into this 22 minutes in.
Yeah, look at the way that's turned around, and especially the gold, the XP graph. Great timing there from Doug. Large spike downward. It seems right around the time that Hugs and Kisses have started to group. They rotate over to the left lane a little bit, pull in Diesel a couple of times. Chronic, I think, finally hits an inflection point where, with Genji's guard and Oni Hunter's garb, he's feeling confident enough in fighting. Now he's got a Mantle of Discord as well. Gore, good eyes, gone to Tahiti. Regardless of the way things have gone recently, want to start up the FG here. Cope, what, you're in on your own on the front line. Oceans is just going to pluck you back in. You do damage, but not nearly enough to survive that. Down goes the Kronos immediately. Sops, Sybil, both quite low here as well. Mando rotates in, but he transforms into the Geb. The ultimate's going to stun down a couple, but you're missing a good bit of damage. Maybe it was just to try to allow the rest of his team to escape. Hugs and Kisses, another big fight.
And now Mando is the one kind of left hanging. Kirmi will eat this matchup up. If he can get the knock-up, then that's going to be easy for him. Doesn't even need that. Just look at the damage this guy's going to do. 7-4-4, he has it going. And full-on deicide, Dave. I can't smell anything more than a free fire giant coming out for him. Ganta Tahiti, I like the call to try and sneak it, but that was maybe too much to hold on to, especially with Cope trying to lead the charge into battle.
I mean, do you think at its core, maybe this is just starting to become a composition issue where, like, early on, maybe these high damage dealers are going to be able to drive this game well? But I don't know who, I mean, I guess Sops is frontlining. Well, not I guess. Sops is frontlining, I suppose, for this Ganta Tahiti team, but it's seems like there's just enough damage and tankiness between Oceans and Chronic to slow down the one extra damage dealer for Gone to Tahiti, and the Geb is maybe not able to keep up with some of the tankiness. I mean, is this just something that might just be rooted in the way the composition for GTT is built?
I think there might be something in the itemization a little bit, just because, like you said, 4 out of 5 of them aren't going to be very tanky, but Sops has also gone for the Relic Dagger. It's not something that we've seen a lot lately. A lot of, like, at the beginning of the year, this was the build. If you didn't have it there right after your Gauntlet of Thebes, usually, then what were you doing? You weren't playing this game right? Now it's still useful. I think it's still helpful, especially with Blink and Shell, long cooldowns that you can have up more often, maybe help your team out. But it doesn't give you enough to maybe make you feel as tanky, and with only those other 2 protection items online, you're not going to be able to withstand the onslaught that is Hugs and Kisses early on, especially a late game of Wheelish, a late game King Arthur, a late game Thoth, a late game Cupid. All of those hit way too hard to deal with. I'm also going to say, as we watch Sops get decimated right there, is a perfect example, and another Final Judgment as a not perfect example of what you should do with it, that Mando's transformations have been a little confusing to me. I can think of at least 9 other people in this lobby, I guess 8 because you can't transform into yourself, that I would want to become before Geb.
He does it again, Cora. It's a Geb for Mando. It's the knock-up, but nothing else there. I mean, I totally agree, but I guess in that moment, I don't know if any transformation is really going to be super helpful. Pluck back in onto Sybil. The double taunt won't be enough here. Suddenly, Hugs and Kisses have taken things over here. They all have Fire Giant. There's 45 seconds on 2 members have gone to Tahiti. Sops is going to come back. This is going to be a heavy stagger. Gore, this might just be the game. Hugs and Kisses work in onto the Titan. The turnaround seems to be complete here. A nice bit of stun damage in, but Mando falls, and the Titan will as well. Hugs and Kisses turn this game around and complete the 2-0.
Yeah, so I can go ahead and tie this one up in a nice, pretty bow, right? Chronic, Kirimi, and Rinjaru are amazing, and there were some questionable decisions and roster swaps there for Gone to Tahiti. I think there's a lot of things that are looking good for them. Cope is really the kind of front stay for them in those early games, but a lot of good fights they were able to take. And unfortunately, it just started to unravel towards that Fire Giant. I think the fight right before Fire Giant, you see them get wiped in a way they didn't expect. And then from that moment on, it just never seemed to fully click with them again. Coat Baby starts running, ahead of everybody else as this Chronos, and maybe one day we'll see a buff on that timer between how long it takes when you press 4 and when you actually start rewinding and get that immunity. But as of right now, it's still so long that it's not enough of a safety mechanism to let you go that far forward.
Hey, what a way for Hugs and Kisses to get their first win here in this phase of the SCC. Was it 23 minutes in Game 1, 26 minutes here in Game 2? Quick work of their opponents in this one. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll break down the set. Well, in Game 2, gone to Tahiti, probably feeling very comfortable with the way the first few minutes of this game went, even into the mid-game, or maybe it's only Cope out of the mid lane who is feeling comfortable with anything. Gormizer with me, though, to break down how Hugs and Kisses turned around this game and end up taking the 2-0 win in the set. Gore, you look at Game 2 here, is there one specific turnaround moment in your eyes, or is it just kind of a slow burn where Hugs and Kisses continually started to pile on pressure?
Again, it's that fight right before the Fire Giant that I think really starts to fall apart. That's the first time we see Cope go down. Kierme gets a great kill to start that one off. And it's kind of separated, right? There was a fight over there around like the Fury Pit and a fight in mid that really kind of collapsed into one fight towards the end. But Kierme getting that initial pick onto Cope, who at the time I believe was 6-0, maybe 7-0, and then was able to then transform that into a lot of pressure. Not having to deal with the Chronos stun and deal with his rewind and the damage. I mean, 19,000 damage came down from Cope. Then it just made it easier to transition to. I think it also got a little more telling as time went on, because from that point to the next two fights that really mattered, Cope was one of the first ones dead, which showcased where the pressure that Kierme, as well as the rest of the crew, were really putting their pressure. Also, we got to see Rinjaru rotate over. And I will say, unsung hero, I think is the best way to word it. I think Chronic and Kierme had a lot of very upfront, very palpable and tangible reasons, much like that they were able to find kills and kind of have their praises sung. But there were so many moments, and when you looked at the KD, just the way he played, Rinjaru was a huge portion of this team's capabilities to win on this Cupid.
Yeah, and I think that's just an advantage that Hugs and Kisses bought in the draft phase. Remember, Gone to Tahiti stuck with this on her. Nice snipe there from Privative. Gone to Tahiti put Diesel on this on her in both games, and there was just way too much pressure, even in the laning phase, I think, for Diesel to ever get to a comfortable point where he could really do all that much in fight. Gore, I got to admit, I think prioritizing a Cupid over and on her seems to be an easy first step to take to give yourselves a chance in this set. Let's see, though, how the standings in the North American SEC are updated after this one. Hugs and Kisses improve to 1-2. GTT, unfortunately, fall down to 0-3. Though we did talk about Gone to Tahiti and maybe mixing some things up and trying new things, maybe that's something they could build on moving forward. Winter Dogs do end up winning again as well, so they are 3-0 at the top of the standings. Let's see the SEC matches that'll be happening after the SPL today. Hugs and Kisses back in action against the Slaughter Squadron. Winter Dogs and Get a Grip, Gore. That should be a good one to round out the evening here over in the North American SCC. That's it, though, for the SEC. Now you got to start looking towards the SPL. That'll be happening in about 40 or so minutes. Radiance versus Obey will be our first matchup here today. Gore, who do you like in that one?
Man, so this is a very difficult question, I think, for anybody who's been watching Smite lately, because if you go back to Friday, if you give me that Obey against Radiance, honestly, against Sanguine, I think they're able to win. I think if we can get that performance back, they recognized they were able to come in and maybe, slipped up a little bit in some of those late game fights. I think that we can just see Obey walk away with a win. I don't think it'll be easy, but it is something that they can do. Plus, you have to go back to it. It was towards the beginning, I think actually the first match of their loss streak, if I remember correctly, but Radiance did lose to Obey the last time they met, so there is precedent for it to be able to come forward. That's actually one that I'm excited to watch just in general for the set, but I'm surprising myself because right now I'm leaning towards Obey based on what we saw Friday.
I can't remember who I voted here. Our predictions week to week are just so tough to lock in now. I think, they send us the poll each week for all the caster predictions, and it's like I choose some, but I rarely feel confident in it, and it's like I'm losing a lot of them this week, but I guess that's a good thing because it means the SPL is at a very competitive point. And then, Gore, you and I will be back casting Sanguine E United to round out this week in the SPL. Ladies and gentlemen, 38 minutes away. The SPL will kick off here on this fine Sunday. Radiance versus Obey will headline that kickoff. Stick around. We'll see you in a bit.
כביש מספר 6 לדרום עמוס מבאקה ועד...
מה זה?
המשבר בקואליציה?
חיטוט, אירובי, פילאטי.
יש רעיון.
כן, 10 בלילה, בקרץ הזה.
אבל למה? זה מזרחי!
לא מעניין, תפתח את הדלת.
לא רוצה!
שום מזרחית לא תהיה פה.
Calling all system blue teams. We're cranking up the temperature. Brace yourselves. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Captains, your working day is complete. Please return to your vessels. The factory is going into shutdown.